A man rode into town. His coat was covered in road dust, and his hat was pulled low, hiding half his face. He stopped in the middle of the street. He said nothing. He just watched. A man was being beaten in front of the saloon. A shop had just been ransacked, and the crowd stood there watching like it was just another ordinary day. The man did not react. He did not step in, but he did not leave. Sheriff Elias Boone stood on the porch of his office, looking down, his expression shifting ever so slightly. He had seen this type before. The kind of men who do not belong anywhere and usually carry something very dangerous with them. Afternoon. The crowd gathered into a circle. At the center of it was Ayanna. Her wrists and ankles were stretched tight, ropes digging deep into her skin until it bled. Every time she moved, her whole body jerked from the pain. Her breathing was fast, her eyes filled with panic. But there was still something in her that refused to break. One of the Black Vulture's boon cutter used the butt of his rifle to lift her chin, forcing her to look straight at the crowd. "Take a good look," he said with a cold smile. "This is the price for refusing to kneel before Victor Crow." Another man, Harlan Pike, tossed a coin onto the ground, his voice full of amusement. "Place your bets." "How long before she begs to die?" Laughter broke out. Not loud, but enough to make the air feel suffocating. Deadwood learned to survive by keeping its head down. The less you see, the less trouble you find. The drifter. He walked through the crowd as if they did not exist. Not in a hurry. Not a hint of hesitation. He stopped, just a few steps from the wooden frame. His eyes passed over Ayanna just once, but it was enough. Boone Cutter stepped forward, his hand resting on his gun. "Old man, you are standing in the wrong place." The drifter did not look at him. He simply spoke, his voice low, steady, cold as steel. "Let her go." No one laughed. No one even breathed too loudly. Harlan Pike smirked and took a step forward. "Oh yeah?" he asked, his tone sharp with challenge. The drifter did not move. His expression did not change. "I do not repeat myself." Up on the porch, Sheriff Elias Boone stepped out. He looked at the scene, his hand tightening around the gun at his side. But he did not come down. He knew the name standing below. And he also knew, this time, Deadwood was about to erupt in gunfire. If you have followed the red dust this far, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so we can keep going together. Where are you watching from? I would really love to hear your thoughts. The air went still. No one moved. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Boone Cutter narrowed his eyes at the drifter, a crooked smile showing beneath the afternoon sun. "Old man," he said slowly, his hand still resting on the grip of his gun. "In Deadwood, nobody gives us orders." Then he turned his head, looking at the crowd like he was putting on a show. "But today, maybe we make an exception." No one understood what he meant until he drew his gun. The shot rang out, just one, but the drifter had already moved before the sound could spread. No one saw when his hand went for the gun. All they saw, Boone Cutter's body jerk violently backward. The bullet tore through his stomach. He clutched at it, both hands gripping tight before he collapsed. Harlan Pike cursed and drew his gun on instinct. But he was too slow. A sharp crack echoed. Pike froze. His eyes went empty. A small hole appeared in the center of his forehead. He dropped without ever pulling the trigger. 2 bodies. 2 bullets. Not a single wasted movement. The crowd stumbled back on instinct. A few people tripped and fell. No one dared to scream. They had never seen anything like that before. This was not a gunfight. This was an execution. A voice came from behind. "That is enough." The crowd parted once again. A man stepped forward, tall, thin, with eyes as cold as stone. Victor Crow, the leader of the Black Vultures. His gaze swept over the 2 bodies, then stopped on the drifter. "You just killed 2 of my men," Crow said. The drifter did not answer. He simply stood there, calm, as if nothing had happened. Crow gave a slight nod, as if making a decision. 5 o'clock this evening, he said. Right here in the middle of this street. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I will kill you. In front of the whole town. Crow turned away. The rest of his men followed immediately, dragging that heavy silence with them as they left the street. The drifter holstered his gun. He walked up to the wooden frame. Ayanna was still trembling, her breathing uneven. He pulled out a knife and cut the ropes. She almost collapsed the moment she was free. He caught her firm but not rough. Can you walk? He asked. Ayanna did not answer, but she nodded. Without another word, the drifter helped her through the stunned crowd. They stepped aside. No one dared to look him in the eye anymore. In the distance, on the porch of his office, Sheriff Elias Boone was still standing there. This time, his hand was already on his gun. And he did not let go. The saloon doors of Martha Hale creaked open. Inside was darker than outside. The smell of whiskey, sweat, and tobacco hung heavy in the air. The scattered chatter quickly died down as the drifter stepped in, supporting a girl on the verge of collapse. Martha Hale, the only woman in Deadwood that even the black vultures treated with caution, looked up from behind the bar. Her eyes moved over Ayanna, then stopped at the deep rope marks carved into her skin. Lay her here, Martha said, her voice firm. No questions. No surprise. She had seen too much to be surprised anymore. The drifter placed Ayanna on a table near the window. Martha quickly brought water and clean cloth, starting to treat the wounds. Her movements were precise, efficient, the kind of control that came from someone who had worked on the edge of life and death. She is lucky to be alive, Martha muttered. Boone Cutter likes to drag things out. The drifter did not respond. He just stood there, silent. After a moment, he turned and walked out of the saloon. Not a word spoken. The sheriff's office sat across the street. The door opened. Sheriff Elias Boone stood behind his desk, his hand resting on his gun, but he did not draw. You came back sooner than I expected, Boone said. The drifter stepped inside, closing the door behind him. You let that happen, he said plainly. No raised voice, no accusation, just a fact. Boone clenched his jaw. You do not know what you are dealing with. I do, the drifter replied. And you do too. But you still stood there. For a long moment, Boone said nothing. Then he turned away and opened a drawer beneath the desk. He pulled out an old notebook. The cover was worn, the corners bent, the pages yellowed with age. He set it on the desk. 2 years, Boone said quietly. I have written everything down. Names, dates, the way they died. The drifter opened the notebook. The first page a name, the second page another name, and then more. A long list of people who would never get to speak again. They have my son, Boone said. He is 14 years old. His voice did not shake, but his eyes could not hold steady. The drifter closed the notebook. What are you waiting for? He asked. Boone looked up. Waiting for enough evidence. So when I move, no one walks away. The drifter gave a slight nod. Then today, you do not need to wait anymore. Boone frowned. Who are you? A brief silence. Then the drifter answered. Someone who once wore a badge and learned that sometimes the law arrives too late. Outside, the wind began to rise. The sun was slowly sinking lower. 5 o'clock was getting closer. And Deadwood, this time, there would be no turning back. Deadwood had never been this quiet. Not because it was peaceful, but because everyone was waiting. Doors shut, curtains drawn, eyes peered through narrow cracks, then quickly pulled back. In Deadwood, everyone knew when the black vultures set a time, someone was going to die. Out front of Martha Hale's saloon, the drifter stood alone, not leaning against the wall, not shielding himself from the sun, just standing there. His hands hung loose, but close enough to his gun. Inside, Martha was tending to Ayanna. The Apache girl was awake now, but weak. Her eyes were fixed on the window, where the silhouette of the man stood motionless in the afternoon light. "Who is he?" Ayanna asked softly. Martha did not look outside. "Someone who does not belong in Deadwood," she replied. A brief pause. "But maybe exactly the one Deadwood needs." Across the street, the office door swung open. Sheriff Elias Boone stepped out. He did not stay on the porch this time. He walked down, slow, steady, stopping a few yards from the drifter. The two men did not look at each other. They did not need to. "You do not have to do this," Boone said. His eyes still fixed ahead. The drifter answered, his voice low. "Neither do you." Boone let out a quiet breath. "I have waited too long." Then stop waiting. A strong gust of wind swept through the street. Dust lifted, swirling around their feet. The sound of hooves echoed from the far end of town. One, then two, then more. Shadows appeared, slowly, stepping into the light. Victor Crow led the way. Long coat, hat low, eyes cold as stone. Behind him what remained of the Black Vultures. 6 men, all armed. They stopped in the middle of the street, facing the drifter, just enough distance to kill or be killed. No one spoke. No one moved. Victor Crow glanced around. Closed doors, empty streets. A faint smile crossed his face. "See?" he said. "No one here believes you are walking away from this." The drifter said nothing. Crow stepped forward. His eyes locked onto his opponent. "This is not a duel. This is a lesson." The wind died. The world tightened. Somewhere, a door quietly shut. And then, a hand began to move. Deadwood had just stepped into the 10 seconds that would decide its fate. No one counted, but everyone could feel it. That moment was coming. The wind stopped. The air froze in the middle of Deadwood's main street. Victor Crow stood facing the drifter, his eyes unblinking. The 6 gunmen behind him spread slightly to both sides, a deadly arc. One of them, Caleb Rusk, swallowed hard. He did not wait any longer. A mistake. He reached for his gun. The sound of metal leaving the holster had barely begun when the drifter's shot rang out. Rusk dropped before he could even pull the trigger. Another man on the left had just raised his weapon. Bang. He spun halfway around before collapsing into the dust. 2 shots, 2 lives, in less than 5 seconds. The rest panicked. One of them shouted, firing wildly. Bullets tore through the air, but hit nothing. The drifter moved. Not fast, but precise. Every step had purpose. Every pause meant death. Bang. A bullet through the chest. Bang. A bullet through the throat. Bang. A bullet into the shoulder. The man turned and tried to run, but made it no more than 3 steps before dropping. Dust rose. Gun smoke slowly faded. Only one remained. Victor Crow. He stood there. Did not draw. Did not run. Just watched. A thin line of blood ran from his shoulder. The bullet had grazed him. Not fatal, but enough to remind him this was not a fight he controlled. The drifter stood a few yards away, his gun still in his hand, steady, unshaken. The silence stretched, longer than all the gunshots that came before it. Victor Crow smirked. "You," his voice rasped. "You are not just some ordinary man." The drifter did not answer. Behind him, footsteps echoed. Sheriff Elias Boone. He stepped into the middle of the street. For the first time, his gun was drawn and aimed straight ahead. At Victor Crow. "It is over," Boone said. His voice was low, steady. Crow glanced at him, then back at the drifter. A flicker of calculation, a flicker of hesitation. Then, he slowly let go of his gun. It fell to the ground. Deadwood remained silent. No cheers. No one rushed out from their porches. Only the wind moving through the bodies and the lingering smell of gun smoke. For the first time in years, Deadwood felt something unfamiliar, an emptiness, the kind left behind when fear finally lets go. Deadwood did not erupt after the gunfight. It fell silent. A different kind of silence. No longer fear, but not yet peace. The bodies of the black vultures still lay in the street. One by one, the townspeople stepped out from behind their closed doors, slowly, carefully. No one cheered. They only looked at the men who once forced them to bow their heads, now lying motionless in the dust. In the middle of the street, Victor Crow was on his knees, his hands raised, his face pale, but his eyes still there, cold, stubborn, unbroken. Sheriff Elias Boone stood in front of him. The gun in his hand did not shake. Not anymore. "Victor Crow," Boone said slowly, like reading a sentence that had waited far too long. "You are under arrest for murder, extortion, kidnapping, and conspiracy with organized crime." Crow let out a quiet laugh. A dry, hollow sound. "You think you have won, Boone?" Boone did not answer. He pulled out the cuffs, locked them around Crow's wrists. The sound of metal clicked, short, cold, final. An ending. But not for everything. 3 days later, Deadwood was no longer the same. Federal agents arrived. The United States Federal Marshal Office took over the entire case file Boone had been building in silence for 2 years. Every name, every date, every death. Nothing was buried anymore. The remaining members of the Black Vultures were hunted down. Victor Crow was taken away in iron cuffs. This time, he gave no orders. The town began to change. Shops reopened. Voices returned to the streets, but no one forgot what had happened. Inside the sheriff's office, Elias Boone stood alone. The old notebook still lay on the desk. Open to the final page. A new name. Boone closed the book. Slowly. The door behind him opened. A federal marshal stepped in. The look in his eyes carried no good news. Boone did not ask. He already knew. "We found the boy," the marshal said. A pause. In the old mining site, north of town. Boone gave a slight nod. He just stood there, a moment longer. "You did the right thing," the marshal said. Boone looked out the window. The streets of Deadwood, where everything had begun to change. "No," he said quietly. "I just did what should have been done a long time ago." Outside, sunlight spread across the street, brighter than the days before. But in Deadwood, justice never comes for free. It always leaves something behind. And this time, it took a son. Deadwood finally breathed. No more gunshots in broad daylight. No more sideways glances. No more fear slipping through every corner of the street. Only a town learning how to live again. 3 days later, the main street was a little more crowded. Shops reopened. The sound of hammers, saws, and voices slowly returned. But whenever people passed the patch of ground where the gunfight happened, they slowed down, just to make sure it was really over. Out front of Martha Hale's saloon, a horse stood still. Scout. Beside it, the drifter tightened the reins. No one asked how long he would stay, and no one believed he would stay long. The door opened. Ayanna stepped out. She was stronger now. The wounds were still there, but her eyes had changed, no longer fear, but clarity. She stopped in front of the drifter. For a long moment, "You did not have to do that," she said, her voice still weak, but steady. The drifter did not look at her. He adjusted the saddle. "Out here in the West," he said slowly, "there are things that have to be done." Ayanna stepped closer. "Who are you?" This time, he stopped. A brief pause. Then he turned and looked at her. His eyes were not cold, but they did not offer anything to hold on to. Just someone passing through. Not an answer, but all she was going to get. A small group stood in the distance. Among them, Sheriff Elias Boone. He did not step forward. He only watched. The two men exchanged a nod. No words. But enough. Boone understood. Some people do not belong anywhere, and should not be kept. Ayanna climbed onto the horse, sitting in front. The drifter mounted behind her. He said nothing more, did not look back. The horse moved forward, slowly leaving Deadwood behind. No one waved. No one called out. Only silent eyes followed, until the two figures grew smaller and disappeared into the red dust road leading north. The wind swept through the street, carrying dust. And something lighter. Deadwood would go on. There would be new troubles, new faces, new stories. But one thing would not change. People would remember the day a nameless rider came into town and brought an ending to those who could not be touched. Out here in the West, some carry guns, some carry the law, and some only appear when things have gone too far, then vanish, as if they were never there. After the stranger rode out of town, Deadwood did not change overnight. It just started breathing again. Shops opened earlier. The sound of hammers, striking nails and saws cutting through wood, replaced the heavy silence that once filled the streets. Children ran along the red dirt road, laughing and playing, and for the first time in years, no one shouted at them to keep quiet out of fear of drawing trouble. A mother raised her voice when her boy broke a bottle of liquor not out of fear, but simply because he had been careless. Sheriff Elias Boone still walked his rounds every morning, but his steps were steadier now. The old notebook remained on his desk, yet he no longer looked at it with the same weight in his eyes. The townspeople rarely spoke of that day. Now and then, they would pause at the patch of ground in the middle of the street, where blood had once soaked into the dust, then give a small shake of the head and move on with their work. They understood. Justice never comes for free, and it always demands a price. But deep down, they also knew something else. Sometimes, all it takes is one nameless rider to come into town, to stand in the middle of the street without backing down, to remind everyone that they still have a choice, not to bow their heads. The story you are following contains many fictional elements, recreated with the aid of artificial intelligence. Please listen with your own consideration and feelings. These fictional details are not intended to change history, but to evoke the spirit of the old Wild West, where people had to live amidst harsh conditions, make difficult choices, and accept the consequences. Through this story, I only hope to share some valuable lessons about compassion, love, and courage, things that remain relevant even as time passes. If this tale brought back a memory or two, I'd be glad to hear from you. Leave a number 1 inch the comments, and if it feels right, you're welcome to subscribe. I love you all, the esteemed audience of the best Wild West stories.